3 o'clock straight up on a Monday edition of The Drive with Q coming at you live inside the friendly confines of the Sports Radio 1029 FM studios. And of course, part of the Coastal Sports Network. Rich Quinones is here, as always. Angel Martinez behind the glass producing the show, keeping us on the air on this 19th of August, 2024. Don't forget, you can get in on the conversation, 727-858-6650. We are powered by Ion TV. Hope everyone had a good sports weekend. We got 2 hours to play with Southwest Florida and up and down the East Coast. A lot of NFL news and notes to get into. Baseball, pennant races starting to heat up. Lloyd Vance will jump on board in about 40 or so minutes. So if you guys want to get in on the conversation, as I alluded to, 727-858-6650. Interesting weekend in the world of sports, especially with the NFL, right? Because we mentioned this during last week's show. Teams that have to overcome a little bit of adversity, whether they're injuries, inconsistent play, dealing with poor play. And as much as I want to take it there, we have to start with a quarterback in your backyard in the Florida region, most notably Miami, in Tua, who basically came out today on Levitard's show and had some really interesting comments about Brian Flores and, being coached up, not being coached up. And I'll tell you, there's a couple schools of thought here. There's a couple schools of thought when you talk about this. I mean, he's being extremely candid, right? I mean, he just basically came out and he was very candid. I thought it was an exceptional interview. Levitard he's a great interviewer. We know that. But he basically said he didn't, Flores basically believed that Tua didn't belong on an NFL roster. He believed Tua didn't believe he should have been an NFL quarterback under Flores. And that current Dolphins head coach, Mike McDaniel, had to train that out of him the past 2 seasons. Now, think about this. Flores was also the coach that came with that major lawsuit, discrimination, the hiring practices and policies of the NFL. He's with Minnesota now. He had Tua for 2 seasons early on in his career. And the quote that really stood out, to put it in simplest terms, if you woke up every morning and I told you that you suck at what you do, that you don't belong doing what you do, that you shouldn't be here, that this guy should be here, that you haven't earned the right, and that you have somebody else come in and tell you, dude, you're the best fit for this. So you go from one extreme to the next. You go from Brian Flores basically saying, you shouldn't be playing in the league, man. You're just not good enough. And then you got McDaniel coming in and saying, hey, with this offense, our weapons, you're the best fit. I mean, that's how I interpret that. And I think a lot of people, too, went on to say, and then you hear it, no matter what it is, the good or the bad, you hear it more and more. You start believing that. I don't care who you are. You can be the president of the United States. You have a terrible person telling you things that you don't want to hear or probably shouldn't be hearing. You're going to start believing that about yourself. And so that's what sort of ended up happening. It's basically been 2 years of training that out of not just me, but a couple of guys as well that have been here my rookie year all the way up until now. So remember, if you go back his rookie season, he got pulled a couple times in the fourth quarter by Ryan Fitzpatrick. There was, again, speculation that Miami was interested in who? What 2 quarterbacks? Tom Brady and Deshaun Watson. The Dolphins fired Flores after the 2021 season. They replaced him with McDaniel, right? So, again, think about what Tua was able to do under McDaniel his first season, 3,500 yards, 23 touchdowns. Now, the schools of thought in this are pretty simple. Is it that Tua is a thin-skinned quarterback? Is it Tua needs to be coached up? Is it possible Tua maybe just can't, doesn't have the thick skin, right? The tough love that's coming from a head coach? Or is it possible that Brian Flores was just not the right fit for the job, and he's a bully. Now, there's always two sides to every coin, is there not? Always. Especially when you talk about the relationship between an NFL head coach and their said franchise quarterback. That can be at times it can be a volatile relationship. It can be a successful relationship, but at times it can also be a relationship that is successful but volatile, or a failure. Flores was 5-10, 10-6, and then 9-8 with Miami. So 24-25 with the Miami Dolphins. And then we know what transpired afterwards after he was fired. And there was the whole thing with Brian Daboll and Belichick and the texting and this and that and the other thing. And all right, hey, good luck. Well, which Brian was it? Right? Which Brian was it? And then all of a sudden Flores came out and said, enough is enough. And what did he do? He filed pretty much a press-grabbing lawsuit accusing the NFL and every NFL team of racially discriminatory hiring practices. So, again, remember that case went to court. And now, again, if you go back a couple years ago, there was a judge that just didn't want to budge on allowing that suit to proceed. I mean, that's a tough sell, man. You go against the NFL, you're going to get crushed. Especially if you're trying to go up against the NFL and say they discriminated against you. But point being, again, there's going to be two sides of this. Is Tua just too soft? Can he not be coached up? Or is there some validity in what he's saying? And the head coaching practices when it comes to that quarterback head coach relationship. I mean, hell, Parcells used to chew out Phil Simms. Simms can go 20 of 25 for 280 and 3 touchdowns and have one bad overthrow, and Parcells would get on him. Belichick was always concerned about the defense. He entrusted Tom Brady. Walsh trusted Montana. Right? Did he not? Chuck Noll constantly got on Terry Bradshaw, but they also won 4 Super Bowls. The head coach and the quarterback do not have to get along. They really don't. I think the head coach and the quarterback have to have a semblance of a mutual respect for one another. That's what I believe. They have to respect one another. And I mean, look, you go to my team, you go to the Giants for a minute, and Daniel Jones settled in after a couple bad throws the other day. They got waxed in the preseason game against the Texans, but Brian Daboll basically telling him, go out there and sling it. Well, that wasn't Brian Daboll a year plus ago, right? Where he was actually just going nuts when Daniel Jones would make a mistake. And then, by the way, we'll get into the fact that he said, hey, man, I'll take CJ Stroud over Josh Allen. He was his coach for 4 seasons, right? Daboll was Allen's coach for 4 seasons. But point being, some players respond to criticism differently. Some players respond to the coach poking and prodding them by what? Turning around and just selling out and balling out. And some quarterbacks are just not fit, not cut out to have a coach that gets on them. You didn't have to worry about that. Brady got on himself. Andy Reid doesn't really get on Mahomes a lot. He doesn't. Because they've been so successful and they've won. And if you have that resume, if you have that body of work already attached, if you build up equity in the league and you won before, McDaniel is the right coach for Tua and the Miami Dolphins. He's the right coach for that team. He really is. They have an understanding, hence, the starkest, comparisons, and you've got a quarterback in Tua that's thriving. And he just signed a big time contract, right? He's got a new contract that's going to pay him more than $53 million per year in new money. So he's coming out and he's basically saying, hey, man, I know what I can do. I got my team that rallies around me. I got a head coach that rallies around me. I got an ownership group, a franchise group. They entrusted me. That's why they're paying me what they're paying me. But I also had to deal with this, you know what, of a head coach who was fixated on trading for Deshaun Watson. I mean, think about that. Think about that for a moment. It nearly happened before the season started in 2021, right? And that also, if you go back, there's reports that that contributed to Tua's decision to decline a captain designation as week one was approaching. And it pretty much hovered over the whole season. The trade never happened, even if Watson had agreed to settle all the stuff that was going on with those pending civil lawsuits, the allegations of sexual misconduct during the massage therapies and the whole 9 yards, and the trade deadline came and went without a new deal. Tua started playing even better. But yet, he still didn't do enough to win over Stephen Ross. If you remember all these rumors that Ross was like, get rid of Flores, get rid of Tua. Who's out there? Sean Payton. Who else is out there? Tom Brady. And that's when we had all those tampering charges. But then, boom, McDaniel, knight in shining armor, 2022, positive reinforcement. Here we go. Bam. And again, like I said, there are some coaches that can basically come out and say, man, you stunk up the joint today. You were not good. You know, you were just not good. Parcells is one of those guys. Belichick is one of those guys. Chuck Noll, one of those guys. It resonates with certain players. But they also have the body of work. Brian Flores, what the hell have you won? Right? Now, I'm also curious. Listen, Brady responds to that, right? Brady responds to that. Sims responded to that. Bradshaw responded to that. There's some quarterbacks that respond to that tough love, that nastiness. Maybe Tua's not that guy. Maybe Tua's a quarterback that you got to placate a little bit. You got to pat on the back. There's nothing wrong with that. Bradshaw early on in his career, because of his high school coach, needed that acceptance, if you recall. He needed the head coach to come out and constantly pat him on the back. He needed his head coaches to always tell him, hey, you're doing a good job. You're doing right. You're playing consistently. You're winning. Just go out there and have fun, baby. It doesn't translate all the time like that in the pros. It just doesn't. Some quarterbacks are cut from a different cloth, and maybe Tua is that guy. But as long as he produces and he puts up numbers and they win, no one's really going to care, because McDaniel's not that type of coach. He's more of a, a little more philosophical, right? In his approach and how he handles things, how he comes off during pressers, pregame, postgame. Now, I guarantee you Flores is going to fire back. I guarantee you Brian Flores is going to fire back because, again, listen, that's how he is. He's definitely going to do that. But it'll be very interesting to see how this kind of plays out early on in the season for Miami. Because if you really break this down, it's all about what? Getting to the playoffs and winning games. That's all. That's all. And there might be a little more of a bullseye now onto his back, because there will be people that will spin this, because there are two sides to every argument, conversation, debate, coin. And if he goes out week 1, week 2, week 3, struggles against Jacksonville, Buffalo, and Seattle, hey, you going to coach him up? Is he going to be able to respond? So there's going to be a little bit of that bullseye onto his back. A little bit, but it does open up the conversation when you do start to look at the head coach and quarterback dynamic in the NFL. It's just, guys, just again, jawing on the sideline like a Bill Cowher for years, or a Chuck Noll, or a Parcells. Coaches that were fiery. Andy Reid's a little more laid back. McDaniel, a little more laid back. Pete Carroll, fiery guy, but he was always clapping. Don't worry about it. You throw the pick, you move on, right? He did that with Russell Wilson. Sean Payton, kind of not that guy, a little more stoic. So it kind of goes back to what we talked about even a week or two ago. Like, you have to have the relationship. I mean, think about some of the top quarterbacks and top head coaches in the NFL right now. Andy Reid, right? Head coach, quarterback. Let's do that. Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes. Will we put Sean McVay? Matthew Stafford. Can we put John Harbaugh? Can we put Lamar Jackson together? McDermott, Josh Allen, right? We're talking about tandems. We're talking about duos. And they're successful. They win, right? You want to sit there and say Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy, go ahead. 12-5, lost in the Super Bowl. You want to go Dan Campbell, Jared Goff, go ahead. They went to the NFC Championship and lost. Mike McDaniel and Tua, granted, they went on the road. They should have been able to figure out a way to beat Buffalo on that Sunday night to close out the season. They had to go on the road. They couldn't score in the cold against Kansas City. They lost in the wild card round, but they went 11-6. Coincidentally enough, they both share the same odds. McDaniel's Coach of the Year plus 2,500. Tua MVP odds plus 2,500. People look at Mike McDaniel. He's kind of a Kyle Shanahan West, right? He's clever. He knows how to get this offense clicking and grooving and moving and in rhythm. But they all have had success. And now fans in Green Bay are saying to themselves, hey, is it going to be Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love for the next 5, 6, 7 years? Is it going to be Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow in Cincinnati? Is it going to be DeMeco Ryans and Stroud in Houston? Is it going to be Harbaugh and Herbert with the Chargers right now? I mean, obviously, the top two, and it's a pretty easy one, is Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. That's what happens when you win a bunch of Super Bowls. That's what happens when you go back to back and you're trying to go back to back to back and try to win 4. And you won what? 3 out of 4, 3 out of 5. So the level of success, when we attach the quarterback with wins, it ultimately also comes down to, is he being coached up? Yes or no? Is it happening with the Philadelphia Eagles? You hear that disconnect between Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. Huge season for those two. Dak Prescott, Mike McCarthy, huge season. Daniel Jones, Brian Daboll in New York, huge season. So if you go back to Tua, is it the quarterbacks? Is it he doesn't like to be coached up? He doesn't respond to criticism, or you have to placate him? And maybe there's a little bit of truth to that. Once in a while, we're human. NFL players are human. Once in a while, you berate these guys and you get on these guys and you try to kick them in the ass and you try to tweak them and you try to prod them and you try to push their buttons. Once in a while, what they want is maybe you just kind of slap the fanny, put your hand around their back or on their shoulder and say, hey, good throw. Good job. That was a hell of a drive. That was a hell of a series. The best head coaches, they find that balance. They're the ones that have sustainability. They're the ones that are successful. They're the ones, Andy Reid, after a while, we all got tired of hearing Andy Reid saying, I have to put the guys in a better position. My job is to put them in a better position to make plays, right? Or I have to put them in. After a while, it's just like nauseating after every loss. If you were an Eagles fan or you covered the team, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But there was a level of success with him and Donovan. You get the 4 straight NFC championships, and then you finally get over the hump and you make it to a Super Bowl. That's very tough to do. Marv Levy, Jim Kelly, they had that working relationship. It worked. If you notice, once Parcells retired, after the Giants won in 90 and Hanley came in, he was dicking around with Sims. He was like, you know what? Let me make Jeff Hostetler the starter. And they fluctuated for a year or two. And then Dan Reeves came back in, inserted Sims back as the starter. And the Giants went 11-5 in 1993. And they won a playoff game. They would have got home field. But Emmett had that big game, overtime, 16-13, late in the season. Eddie Murray, field goal, boom. Dallas goes on, win the Super Bowl. Giants have to go on the road, and they got waxed by the 49ers. But again, the head coach and the quarterback were on the same page. And it's just possible Tua and Flores were just not on the same page. It's also possible, it's hard for me to sit there and say a Phil Simms in 1993, 15 years into his NFL career, and a Tua who was a second or first and second year starter or first and second year pro with Flores. So sometimes it's just not the right fit. And sometimes quarterbacks respond differently. Athletes respond differently. You look at all the great head coaches, all the great managers. I mean, hell, look at the Pat Rileys. Look at the Phil Jacksons, right? They knew exactly what players to push, to prod, and what players to kind of just, you scale back a little bit, you put your arm around them a little bit, but you do it judiciously. You do it judiciously. You don't give them that false sense of security. You don't let them believe they're better than they really are. That's how you keep them in line. That's how you keep them hungry. That's how you keep them winning. That's the key. And the best coaches do that consistently. And that's why they last. All right, 23 past 3 o'clock hour, just cranking up on a Monday edition of The Drive with Q. Rich Quinones here. Angel Martinez behind the glass, producer show, keeping us on the air. 727-858-6650. Your thoughts on Tua, Flores. We'll recap week 2 of the NFL preseason. A starter has been named in the NFC East. Not a surprise when we talk about the Washington Commanders. We'll give you your thoughts on that as well. And then I have to tell you, I have to caution Giant fans. After what I saw the other day, and I know people are going to say, chalk it up to Russ, it's only the preseason. Once again, I can see why this team is in for an absolutely long friggin' season. And of course, we'll talk a little baseball in the 4 o'clock hour. Lloyd Vance will join us in about 15 on the NFL. Again, keep it locked in, 727-858-6650. Quick timeout. We'll come back on the other side on this Monday edition of The Drive right here on Sports Radio 102.9 FM. The Game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town, part of Coastal Sports Network, and we are powered by ION TV for all your late-breaking news, weather, traffic alerts, accident reports in the Tampa area. Check them out online, ION TV. Quick timeout. We'll come back on the other side.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, that's rad. It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying, totally, just shorter. As in, I totes love going to the mall with Becca. Another word you might hear is jelly. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will think you're, rad, just the same. To learn more, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces, just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
All right, 3:27 on a Monday. We'll take up to 5 o'clock straight up. And yeah, I was saying too, and getting a couple tweets, and we'll get into some responses also on Facebook as well. Head coaches and quarterbacks do not have to love each other or get along. But a good head coach knows what buttons to push and when to push them. I mean, think about that for a minute. You have to. You have to. That's because if you don't, you lose the respect of the locker room. And how many times have we seen that, right? And you want to have that fine line. That's the other thing. Nobody ever wants to talk about that. You want to have that fine line between, am I coaching these guys up the right way? Am I not coaching them up? Am I coaching them up? Do I need to change? Sometimes you do have to, again, put the ego to the side, 727-858-6650. And, it's rare. We see head coaches change when we know that they're on the hot seat, or sometimes it's too little too late. Back in the day, they were going to die on their boots on. That's just how they are, right? I mentioned you, and we'll talk to Lloyd in about 10. Not a surprise. The Commanders officially named rookie quarterback Jayden Daniels starting quarterback, which I'm not shocked at all. You knew Dan Quinn was going to come in with that defensive-minded mentality first and foremost. And I know Mariota was, getting some snaps here and there. By all accounts, Lake Lewis, good friend of mine in the show, covers Washington. He knows him inside and out. He told me once they drafted this kid, they believed that they already had a franchise quarterback in place. He also believed that he was going to be the week one starter. So again, you get those reps in preseason. Remember, Mariota was unavailable to play Sunday in Miami because of a hamstring issue. But I don't really think that was going to hamper or impact Daniels' status. I mean, think about this. In these two preseason games, Jayden Daniels has completed 12 of 15 passes for $123. He didn't throw a touchdown pass, did score on a 3-yard run against the Jets on a zone read. They just like this kid's skill set. He had that gorgeous 42-yard chuck down the field to Brown, checked off at the screen, right? So I'm very high on this kid. I think he's in play for Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think Washington is also going to be a sleeper team, believe it or not. I think they're going to surprise some people out there. I mean, this is what you do. You take a flyer on a quarterback that you believe can change the course of your franchise. And if you do that and it works out, you look like a genius, right? You look like an absolute genius. Jimmy on Facebook chiming in. Q, good start to the show. Excellent monologue. I agree with you on this one, right? What buttons to push? You listed some of these great Hall of Fame coaches. I know you've left a lot of them out, but can you imagine Lombardi and Starr pushing all the right buttons, having that mutual relationship and that mutual respect for one another, and it equals championships? Yes, it does. Appreciate you tuning in as well. It's very hard to win in the NFL. It really is. You have to have everything go right. You have to. Everything has to go right. You have to get through injuries. You have to overcome a substantial amount of adversity. And in today's NFL, I think sometimes there was a time in the NFL where let the kids sit. Remember that? Let the kids sit a year or 2 or 3. Aaron Rodgers had to sit and wait, and then he had a cup of coffee and a couple series against Dallas on Thursday night, and everyone loved his footwork. That's all I remember. Everyone loved his footwork. I remember doing hits on Fox Sports National at the time when I was on 1290 in Delaware, and they were like, "What'd you think of Aaron Rodgers' footwork?" I mean, that was the topic of conversation in a couple series and throws against the Dallas Cowboys. And we saw what Rodgers went on to do throughout the course of his career. Steve Young got bounced around a little bit, had to wait his turn, they kept going back and forth, benching him to Montana, and then Montana with the injuries and the bench and the back and forth and the back and forth. Sometimes you just got to wait it out. Now, Mahomes, when the Kansas City Chiefs had Alex Smith, who just serviceable quarterback, just won, nothing sexy. It was only a matter of time before Mahomes got in there. And once he did, took advantage of the situation, and boom, he's an all-time great already. He's going in the Hall of Fame, right? MVP, Super Bowl champ, multiple times, trying to win for a third straight time in a row, 3 in a row, which is just unheard of. And then there are some quarterbacks that come out of nowhere, i.e. like a Purdy, i.e. like a Tom Brady. So, the days of let them sit, they want these rookies, they want them out there, man. I don't know if you saw the story that the Falcons are going to sit out Michael Penix Jr. in their final preseason game. And that leaves me to believe, if you think about that, that Raheem Morris and the coaching staff pretty much have seen enough. When you talk about the team's joint practices, the first preseason game against the Dolphins a couple weeks ago, I think he went 9 of 16 for like a buck 10. I guess the reps, here you go. Now, they're coming out and they're saying that he won't start in 2024. Okay. Number 8 pick in this year's draft. Just go back to what I said, right? We want these guys to start sooner rather than later. Obviously, they gave a lot of money to Kirk Cousins. 4 years, $180 million in the offseason. So this kid right now is considered the quarterback of the future. And again, we don't know what the future holds. We don't know when his opportunity is going to come about. Now, Morris, if you go back, even when he was head coach with Tampa, not a big believer in starters playing in the preseason. Okay, fine. The Falcons sat around 40-something odd players Saturday. Pretty much the same thing you're going to see against Jacksonville on Friday. Heineke's probably going to get a start. You'll get that undrafted rookie. John Padlock, that's a great name, by the way. Get some reps in Baltimore. Fine. But you got a quarterback in Cousins coming off a big-time injury. You have a quarterback in Cousins that's 36 years of age. You got a quarterback in Cousins that was miffed that Atlanta drafted this kid. I mean, why'd they draft the kid? Everyone was talking about that draft pick. You just signed Kirk Cousins. What are you drafting this kid for? I think this kid's going to start sooner rather than later. And we know that the Falcons just made the move for Judon. The Patriots are obviously tanking, right? That's the worst kept secret in the NFL. We know they're tanking. So the Falcons tried to shore up the defense a little bit. Listen, they open up the season against the Steelers. Then they have to go on the road and they take on the Eagles. Then they come back and they play the Chiefs, they play the Saints, they play the Bucks. So let's just say, for argument's sake, they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games in and they're 0-5 or 1-4. And then you have a winnable game on the road against the Panthers. And if Cousins is struggling at 0-5, they're going to bench him. They're going to start this kid. I know you don't like to start rookies on the road. That's a bad Panthers team. But it's yet to be seen. It's yet to be seen. So just kind of hang that on your hat, right, for a little bit. Just kind of put that off to the side because, again, I know it contradicts everything I've been saying about these quarterbacks getting them out there. Case in point, you gave Kirk Cousins so much money. You want him to be the starter going forward. It's a different situation in Washington. That was a major overhaul for the Washington Commanders. They got rid of the toxic ownership group, right? They had to. They got rid of Eric Bieniemy. That blew up in their face. Nice guy, Ron Rivera, couldn't win. They got rid of him. They dropped 8 in a row to end the season. And they drafted Daniels. And they also believe that they have a franchise player. Washington's going to be much better than people expect them to be. You still got McLaren, you got Dotson, you got Brian Robinson Jr. I know they gave up a couple of defensive players last season, but they still have some good linebackers. The secondary was able to make some plays here and there. The offense was just really bad, and then they quit on the head coach. They want to see if this kid's going to sink or this kid's going to swim. I think the kid's going to swim. I think Washington potentially is going to be a surprise. All right, 340, Lloyd Vance on the other side. As always, a reminder, we're brought to you by our good friends over at Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clements Bridge Road in Deptford, New Jersey. Sports equipment and more used gear. You can do online shopping. Just plug in playitagainsports.com/Deptford and also Acorn Oak for all your marketing, branding, and digital needs. Check them out online, A2Oak.com. Lloyd Vance at 3:40. We'll punch him up, 727-858-6650. It's a Monday edition of The Drive with Q. Rich Quinones here. Angel Martinez behind the glass. We are powered by Sports Radio 102.9 FM, The Game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town, and of course, part of the Coastal Sports Network. Give me a follow on X at Rich Q on Q. And also for all the late breaking news, traffic, and weather reports, check out our good friends over at Eye on TV. Lloyd Vance on the NFL on the other side.
Hey, Dad, your prescription will be ready in just a minute. Hey, Dad, your laundry will be ready in just a minute. Dad, your lunch will be ready in just a minute.
Hey, honey, why don't you take a minute?
When you help care for a loved one, you give them as much time as you can, making sure they're safe and comfortable. But it's just as important that you take some time for yourself. At AARP, we can help with information and useful tips on how you can maintain a healthy life balance, care for your own physical and mental well-being, and manage the challenges of caring for a loved one. Because the better care you take of yourself, the better care you can provide for your loved one.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you.
You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides to support you and your loved one at aarp.org/caregiving. That's aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
All right, class, let's hear what everyone did this weekend. Jill?
Well, I raised my older sister to a big oak tree. It was at least 100 years old. My mom said I must have set a record or something. And then we went down by a stream and perched up on this huge rock and saw all of these little minnows swimming around way below us. And then I rescued my little brother from an evil slug king who was guarding him at the bush fortress. And my sister and I brought him back to our super twig fort for safety. And then we all laid out and told stories until it got dark. And the Big Dipper led us all the way home.
Awesome. Where were you, Jill?
Yeah. We went to the forest. It's not that far away. Anyone want to come this weekend?
Ask your parents to take you and your friends to the forest this week and find the fun, adventurous you. It's closer than you think. Check out discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
All right, 3:40 on the East Coast on a Monday edition of The Drive with Q. Thank you guys for chiming in. 727-858-6650. Should be able to punch up Lloyd in a moment. Don't forget, he's host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 FM The Game every Monday at 8 o'clock. I want to get to some Facebook comments as well. Our good friend Joe in Summers Point chiming in. Q, you mentioned Daboll and Jones and how the Giants are going to have a piss poor season. You know, I'm a big time Giants fan. I watched the game the other day. I was absolutely just flabbergasted at that one interception that Jones threw. Is that rust or is that who he is? Yeah. You know, you cannot, and I've gone back and forth with people with this already, and it's already annoying me. I don't care what happens in the preseason because the preseason is designed to get reps, to knock rust off, and to get out of there healthy and alive. That's all you're concerned about. But my problem with what I saw on that one interception was something that has been Daniel Jones's bugaboo for the last several years. And that's decision-making. That's decision-making. And there's no other way around it. Like, you cannot be a quarterback in the NFL and make that type of decision where you're basically trying to avoid the safety and you just chuck it up to try to save face. You can't do that. And the problem is Giant fans don't want to hear that. They don't. What they want to hear is it's rust. Come on, man. Its decision-making is bad. It's got to get better. And when are we going to sit there and say, okay, well, now he's going to break through? Right? I mean, you're going to look at this and say, he's just trying to make plays. He's just trying to make a play for his team. It's horrible, the decision making. And I can't have a franchise quarterback who I believe is a franchise quarterback make those types of plays or those decisions. I can't. Not when you're entering your 5th, your 6th, your 7th year. I mean, come on, man. Stop. It's like you're kidding yourself already with this guy. And after a while, it's just insanity. It's insanity. It's frustrating. I got hammered, and I'm already seeing the comments. Greg, Giants fan on Facebook, chime in. And again, there you go, Q, crushing Daniel Jones. You want him to throw for 4,000 yards and 35 plus touchdowns every season. That's not realistic in the NFL. Look how many quarterbacks did it. Stop. I don't want to hear from you, Greg. I don't want to hear from Giant fans about this. I don't. Because if you're making $160, $40 million a year, I'm sorry. You have to do better than 20 touchdowns. You have to do better than 3,200 yards. I mean, think about that. The year that they went to the wild card and they beat Minnesota, he threw for 15 touchdowns and only 3,200 yards. Now, his legs won him a bunch of games. Carolina, the Colts, Chicago. He made plays. Don't get me wrong. He made plays. I'm not going to take that away from him. He had 7 rushing touchdowns. He's tough. He's injury prone, though. So if you combine that, he had 22 total touchdowns and close to 4,000 passing yards. In today's NFL, is it asking too much for a starting quarterback to throw for 4,000 yards? Really? Is it? So let me just pull up last year. And let's just say 25 plus touchdowns. Hell, I'll even meet you halfway or someone halfway. I'll say throw for 3,800 yards and 25 touchdowns. If I were to ask you guys, 727-858-6650, how many quarterbacks last year in the NFL threw for more than 3,800 yards and 25 touchdowns? I mean, let's just go through the usual suspects, right? Tua, Jared Goff, Prescott, Josh Allen, Brock Purdy, Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes actually had a down year for Mahomes standard. 27 touchdown passes. Jordan Love, second-year quarterback. 32 touchdown passes. CJ Stroud, 4,100 yards, a rookie, 23 touchdown passes. Baker Mayfield, hello Tampa, 4,000 yards, 29 touchdown passes. Trevor Lawrence, over 4,000 yards, just 21 touchdown passes. But then Derek Carr, dink and dunk, 25 touchdown passes. Lamar Jackson, 25 touchdown passes, 3,800 yards. I mean, am I really asking a lot? No, I'm not. I'm not asking a lot from the friggin' quarterback. I'm not. Might be asking a lot of Lloyd Vance jumping on 340 on 346. Can we punch up? I'm going to have to probably refresh again. This is what happens. Lloyd, you hang tough. We're going to pull you up in a second. There's my guy. There he is. What's going on, brother? How are you? Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football and Sports Radio 109 FM The Game every Monday at 8 o'clock. How are you, my friend?
Doing good. You're like, click the link. I didn't know which link you were talking about. I'm like, I got too many of them, man.
That's all right. Yeah, I know. I was just talking. Well, I was going back and forth, right? I started the show with the Tua comments. I want to get your thoughts on that. On Brian Flores no longer, obviously, with the Miami Dolphins, and I think there's two sides to every story, right? Every conversation, debate, whatever it is. And I don't know if this is a question of, is Tua too soft of a quarterback? Does he need to get coached up? Do you have to placate him? Or maybe Flores wasn't the right fit for the job and McDaniels is. But obviously, quarterback, head coach relationship, you don't have to love each other. There has to be respect there. And I think if, the good head coaches know exactly how to push the right buttons when it comes to some of these quarterbacks. And the successful quarterbacks understand it's part of the game. So listen, kid's getting paid. We know that. He's been extremely successful, got to win some playoff games, puts up gaudy numbers in a right system. And I'm sure Flores is going to fire back as well. But I don't have a problem with what Tua said. He's being fully transparent and honest. I'm just wondering, is it also maybe that he's not as thick-skinned as you would want a franchise quarterback to be, or maybe there's credence and validity to what he's saying about Flores, who, sounds like a guy that's pretty much a bully and he's never going to give you any credit.
Well, I think there's disconnect here between the coach and quarterback. And a lot of times this happens. He's a defensive-minded guy. He comes from that Belichick tree. And, he's going to treat his quarterback tough. Belichick treated Tom Brady like a stepchild for a good portion of his career. And I think he was expecting the same type of toughness out of Tua, and he just was not getting it. And obviously, the whole situation went awry there. And were they tanking, not tanking? And the front office situation there with Stephen Ross, the owner, who wasn't getting along with him. And then obviously Flores was out the door very quickly. Onto new situations, and Tua has thrived there. I think with McDaniel, who's more of a player's coach, and he's offensive minded, so he wants to put him in the best positions. And let's face it, that team that Flores had, it was kind of devoid of talent. They've done a pretty good job turning around that roster, and things have gotten better for that team. But down the stretch last year, that they just kind of crumbled, and it kind of showed you, all right, maybe there is some validity in what Brian Flores is saying in terms of, Tua's performance. Is he the guy to lead them to be a championship caliber type of team?
Yeah, you mentioned, I brought it up, Belichick was always concerned more or less about the defense really than the offense. But I think you do have to have Chuck Noll got on Terry Bradshaw. Bradshaw needed that arm around him. Parcells got on Sims. Sims responded. We've seen that, right? Now you have a quarterback in Tua. And I think the kid already has a bullseye on his back because of the contract that he signed, because of the contract that the Miami Dolphins laid in place, and the fact that, again, should have found a way to beat Buffalo to avoid going on the road last year to Kansas City in the wild card game, and the offense just basically falling asleep in the cold, right? So I'm wondering now, is there extra bullseyes on Tua for these comments? People are going to wait to see, okay, what happens the first sign he starts to struggle? They come out of the gate, the offense isn't clicking. How's he going to be treated? How is he going to respond? Or is this basically much to do about nothing?
Well, it's going to be something that's in the mind of everybody as they watch him play the season. Obviously everybody's going to take sides and say, okay, Flores is right, Tua's right. But, Tua's there. He's got to cut off the rabbit ears. I used to say that a lot here in Philadelphia when I was covering Don McNabb. A lot of times he just let that outside noise get to him, and you have to focus on your job, especially as being the face of the team. And it's going to be a roller coaster in your career. All the quarterbacks that I've talked to throughout my writing career, these guys said there's ups, there's downs, and the tough guys last, and that's what Tua's got to show. I think to your point, Q, back in the day, I think he was kind of coddled a little bit by Nick Saban, and he's spoiled coming from Alabama, where he has all those top recruits, 5-star guys, and it was easy. And the NFL is not easy. And I think that's a tough transition for a lot of these great college quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? The NFL is not easy. And I also mentioned, I made a point of reference that there was a time in the NFL where sit, learn, be quiet, right? And then now there's a time where, hey, man, you got to get out there and you got to start, which kind of brings me to this. Two quarterbacks I want to get into for a moment. And again, as we approach 4:00, Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 FM. The Game here every Monday at 8 o'clock. And if you guys are tuning in, this is The Drive with Q. Rich Quinones here. Angel Martinez behind the glass. We'll take you up to 5. Jaden Daniels, no surprise, right? I mean, let's be honest. Mariota, this kid wasn't drafted to sit behind Mariota. And this has nothing to do with Mariota being banged up hamstring injury. Jaden Daniels, quarterback, franchise guy going forward. You got a defensive-minded coach. You got some weapons on offense. This is one of the teams you believe is going to be a sleeper, if you will. You look at some of the odds right now for Jaden Daniels, offensive rookie of the year, pretty profitable. You want to take a flyer on the Washington Commanders as we speak, but I think this is your sink or swim moment, right? If you're Jaden Daniels, and I think the kid's gonna swim, right? There's always going to be ups and downs, especially for rookies. It's not going to go smooth like CJ Stroud, right? Everything he was throwing last year was coming down and being caught. But if you're Washington, changing them to guard, right? Ownership group, head coach, coordinators. Here we go. You open up the season against Tampa, the Giants, Cincinnati, and Arizona. These are all not gimmies, but if he can go out there and he can make some plays. Now, here's the one interesting point. I know you're thinking about it. You got a rookie quarterback opening up the season on the road, which is always tough, but surprised that Daniels named the starter for Washington.
No, I wasn't surprised in terms of they've been building towards as soon as they drafted him. They knew he may have been the most ready quarterback out of all the guys coming out last year. And the thing is, they're putting him in a pretty good situation. Yes, the offensive line is kind of fluid, but you have Cliff Kingsbury there who's going to put him in good positions. He's worked with Kyler Murray, a mobile dual threat quarterback in the past, and now you're bringing in a record-setting quarterback coming from college and Jaden Daniels after a Heisman Trophy season. So I think he's going to have he's going to be spectacular. I think as long as he can stay healthy, he took a lot of hits in college and he's kind of slate framed. If he can stay healthy, I think he could be the front runner for that offensive rookie of the year, as you were just talking about the odds. So, already in the preseason, you're seeing that he throws a nice catchable football. He's on the same page with Terry McLaurin. And Washington has some pieces to work with. So it's going to be fun to watch them. And we know the NFC East, after the Eagles, I think it's kind of wide open underneath them.
Plus 475, second shortest odds to win Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2024. Pretty much means he's got a great chance to win the award, according to the odds makers. Michael Penix Jr., we're not going to see him the rest of the preseason. It appears that Morris and the coaching staff has seen enough from the rookie quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons. They went a little more defense, obviously, with the Pats tanking, trading Judon. Here you go, Kirk Cousins, 36, making a lot of money, coming off major surgery. I know they'll say that Penix Jr. is not going to start in 2024, but I mean, I can see a month of Kirk Cousins just dinking and dunking and the offense just being absolutely anemic, right? I mean, think about this. They open up against the Steelers, then the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Saints, the Bucks. Those are not gimme games. I mean, they're tough games. I mean, realistically, if you saw what the Steelers offensively did the other day, you say to yourself, all right, they're going to have a bad season like the Patriots and the Giants. So you give them a win. Back to back, the Eagles and the Chiefs, let's just say they lose those two games. Then all of a sudden you got the Saints. If they lose that game and then the Bucks, you're 1-4, 2-3 at best heading to Carolina. And again, we don't want to just throw out any type of hypotheticals, right? Because that's not what we want to do or speculate, but you have to at sometimes. If he's struggling a little bit or the offense is averaging 16, 17 points a game, who's to say they're not going to go to Penix, even though they just gave Cousins a substantial amount of money?
Yeah, I mean, it's Arthur Blank's money, Q, but I would think, a 4-year, $180 million contract,
yep,
$50 million signing bonus, $100 million guaranteed, that the 35-year-old coming off an Achilles injury, Kirk Cousins, is going to get every opportunity to lead this team. But it just, to me, it almost didn't make sense that they drafted Michael Penix Jr. He's a kid. He's ready to play. He's ready to roll, and he's going to have to wait his turn. So I think, they're going to have him in the bullpen ready to go. But that's just a lot of money, and it'd be a lot of egg to wipe off their face to say, we made a mistake at the beginning of free agency, bringing in Kirk Cousins. But there's so many weapons on this offense for them to work with. Yes, they've lost Rondale Moore for a period of time, but they do have Darnell Mooney, Drake London, and our offensive line is pretty solid, and Bijan Robinson at the back position. So a lot of pieces for Cousins to work with. That first game, as you said, that's going to be a kind of a prove-it game. You're going to see which quarterback is going to step up, whether it's the Pittsburgh Steelers, who had 13 drives and only 3 points between Fields and Russell Wilson?
Horrible.
Or is it going to be Cousins? I think, Atlanta's at home in that game. I have to lean towards them in that one. Obviously, the key is going to be, can they block TJ Watt and Highsmith, and the amount of pressure on Kirk Cousins, because is he still able to move coming off that Achilles injury? So pressure on both sides of the quarterbacks going into that game.
16 of books, 4 o'clock straight up on a Monday edition of The Drive with Q. Rich Quinones here. We are part of Sports Radio 102.9 FM, The Game, Coastal Sports Network. Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football, 8 o'clock on Mondays, kind enough to join us. You mentioned Russell Wilson, right? Signs that 4-year, $140 million contract extension to remain with Seattle back in 2019 through 2023. And at the time, the highest paid player in the NFL. Fast forward, 2021, final year in Seattle. Fast forward, 2022, boom, Seattle trades Wilson and a 4th-round pick to Denver, and then he signs a 5-year, $245 million contract extension with the Broncos. Fast forward, no longer with the club. Point being is, just because Cousins signed that contract, if he struggles, he struggles, right? And there's no law written that I can't pull you if you're making $150, $160, $200 million.
You're right, Q, and that's the world that we're in today's NFL, where it's win now, and there's a lot of pressure on these coaches and their offense coordinators to get these quarterbacks in the best position, win games, and then all you got to do point to is the Niners. Think of Jimmy G. Jimmy G was thought to be the entrenched starter. They draft Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, last pick in the draft, and they said, you know what, this is not working. Give the kid the opportunity. So you may be right, and when you look at Russell Wilson, the Denver Broncos said, you know what, we're going to pay him $39 million to go away, buy him out, and then he signed a value deal with the Steelers. So it is possible. It's just, can they work out the caponomics around this situation if they sign somebody and then they want to jettison him very quickly in that contract? But that's a lot to eat. But I'm interested to see which Kirk Cousins is going to show up there. Obviously, I always say he's only got one playoff win, but in the regular season, he's usually pretty well. And I think this young group led by offense coordinator Zach Robinson, who's bringing over that Rams playbook, is excited to get he's going to get his hands on all these weapons.
I feel like Giant fans are getting annoyed already, which tells me that there's a long season ahead. And I mean, what do we chalk it up to? The rust of Daniel Jones, or just once again the piss poor decision making, right? I mean, I just, after a while, I don't want to hear anymore. I've been going back and forth with Giant fans on social, on Facebook, on Twitter. I'm like, just stop. Like, I don't know. At this moment, I feel as though this team is kind of stuck in NFL purgatory, right? Because they gave Daniel Jones a nice hefty raise, the contract extension, based on the run that they had a couple years ago. They won a playoff game on the road against Minnesota. I threw out his stats. I mean, he still didn't throw for 25 touchdowns in that season. I think he had 29 total because he rushed for 7. And then he added another 700 on the ground. So he had just under 4,000 total yards. I mean, I'll get into my standards, but before we do that, look, you're trying to avert a safety, getting the sack in the end zone, and you just that's an Eli play from back in the day. I mean, it's just a frustrating play. Quarterbacks that are making $160 million, $40 million a year, entering season 6, season 7, should not be making that type of play. And then you have Dave's come back. Dave will say, you know what, we want him to be aggressive and slinging. Yeah, but at what cost? The decision making, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you're out there and you got your head stuck up your culo, I mean, come on, man, your decision making is piss poor. And that, to me, I just think his habits, they're still, his bad habits have not changed, and that worries me a little bit going into this season.
Q, it should, and he had his apex winning that playoff game, and they got caught up in a moment. They gave him that contract, and we know last year he played, 4 to 6 games, and he really wasn't sharp after he got that money, and now he's coming off an ACL injury, and it's just a lot. And you see him, he does look rusty. What was he, 2 for 6, less than 20 yards passing, 2 interceptions, looking tentative in the pocket. But then you're saying, okay, what do the Giants go to? Are they going to go to Drew Lock? We've seen what he can do. So they're stuck with Daniel Jones. I always say follow the money. They're going to give him his chance, but I think this is going to be a very long season for the Giants. And maybe it's a situation like you're saying, they're kind of in purgatory. A lot of times you got to get very bad before you can get good, and they can kind of tear this thing down and then kind of rebuild. But will Daboll survive this? Will Joe Shane survive this? It's going to be interesting in terms of the management of this team if those guys can live through this. But that contract is going to be an albatross. Jones better lean on Malik Neighbors and whatever else they can scotch tape and bubble gum on that offense, because right now I'm not just seeing a lot in terms of that offense on paper. And then you see defensively, they just traded one of their defensive linemen over to the Cowboys. Is that like sending up the white flag, because they need as much as possible on defense. I know they have Lawrence and they have Thibodeau and some other guys there, but you're very familiar with this roster. I just don't think there's a lot of talent there.
Yeah, I think the defense will keep them in games. They still really need to have that bona fide. Look, what they've missed ultimately is just that bona fide, legit pass rusher that can consistently disrupt and get to the quarterback, not almost get to the quarterback. But again, the Burns, the Simmons, the Thibodeau, obviously the Sexy Dexies, they got some defensive players. The offense only scored 10 points against the Houston's now Texans. Granted, DeVito got the majority of the reps, and Jones settled in, had a nice throw to Neighbors. Neighbors, Hyatt, they have weapons. Slayton's still there. He's reliable. They have to run the ball, I think, to open things up. They can't be predicated on the pass first, because I still don't trust that offensive line. And, you look around the NFL, and again, I feel as though I keep belaboring this point, but if you pull up quarterbacks from last year, I'm having arguments with these goofballs left and right. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 quarterbacks that threw for 38 or more 100 yards. As far as 25 plus touchdowns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. I mean, what are we doing here? Am I asking too much for the quarterback to start 17 games, throw for 4,000 yards? Like, do the math. Seriously, it annoys me. Like, do the math. If my liberal arts math, you're talking 235 yards a game to get to 4,000 and have multiple touchdown passing games, get to 28, 30. I don't know why people are like, those are unrealistic numbers. In today's NFL, how are they unrealistic? Where the NFL wants the game to be wide open. They want points to light up the scoreboard. The way the game now is, you can't touch the quarterback. You can't touch the wide receivers. You can't come across the line of scrimmage. You can't do anything. We're going to give you 15. We're going to give you a fresh set of downs. It's catered towards the offense. And yet, 22 touchdowns, 17 touchdowns, 3,200 yards, 3,300 yards. I mean, am I asking too much of my starting quarterback?
Well, he's being paid like a franchise quarterback, and at some point they thought he was. I know, obviously, a lot of people, when they talk to me about Jalen Hurts, they say, well, you got to factor in the total touchdowns, how many rushes, touchdowns, and how many. It's a passing league first, though. So you want your quarterback to hit those barometers, like you said, 4,000 yards, 30 touchdowns. You like to have them, 10 or less interceptions and drive his team. And I always had that question about Daniel Jones. Even when he came out of Duke, it's like, was he ever the guy? Could he control the locker room? Because, the quarterback has got to be the Pied Piper. He's got to get along with everybody. He's got to be that leader, show a lot of moxie. And I just don't see that from him. And, you wonder, will these guys rally around him? And yes, they did for that one playoff game, and everything looked like it was moving in the right direction. But then the very next week, they just laid an egg against the Eagles, and then they still gave him the contract. So, John Mara and that front office, they strapped this team with Daniel Jones. I think it might be a one-year experiment. So if he doesn't get it right this season, it may be like, okay, go into the draft, see what they can find, because right now Jones just not looking like the guy. And if he's smart, as you're saying, they do have some good, Hyatt, Slayton, I think, is a productive type of guy they could work with. And then Neighbors looks like he could compete with Jaden Daniels in terms of the rookie year. But we also have to factor in the weather. You know what I mean? Some of these quarterbacks have perfect conditions and domes and this and that. But in the early part of the season, he should be putting up some numbers.
Yeah, on August 18th, 19th, 20th. I don't want to hear about the weather in preseason. I just don't. You mentioned two quarterbacks. I might have to walk back one prediction. I mean, how bad did that Steelers offense look the other day? I mean, you had Fields throwing for 92. You had Russell Wilson throwing for 47 yards, a $113. The offenses looked absolutely anemic between those two. And I'm wondering now, did I jump the gun a little bit and say that Fields was going to start week one?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be week one, but he's going to get his opportunities. At least when he got out there, he was able to put points on the board. I know it was a field goal and this and that, but, there's just something amiss with this team. Yes, they don't have much in terms of the receiving core. Pickens is probably their only guy. And then Najee Harris coming out of the backfield. And this is another offense that just does not have a lot. Defensive-minded coach who's built a defense that is one of the best around in the NFL. But is this offense going to be able to score enough points? And you have Russell Wilson, who's 35 years old. His legs are not what they used to be, and a very leaky offensive line. I mean, guys were just coming through. Ever since Pouncey kind of retired, the offensive line has not been the same. So I think there's going to be more of the same. And eventually, and let's not forget, this is a 1 year prove-it deal for Russell Wilson. It's like 1 year, the numbers are very low, like 1 year, $1.3 million or so. So they can say, you know what, we can jettison very easily. He's being paid basically by the Broncos. Give Fields an opportunity. And I think if he's out there running for his life, why not give the kid who has better wheels an opportunity?
Yeah, there's some bad. There's been piss poor quarterbacking play. There really has. I looked at Pittsburgh and I pulled up their schedule, and then I looked at the AFC North and I looked at their win total. I mean, I'm almost convinced now that I have no confidence in this team. Look, they're not winning the division. They're plus 1,100. Baltimore and Cincinnati have the shortest odds, and then you got Cleveland at plus 600. But what was weird last year is that you had all four teams finish with a winning record. I mean, that's absolutely crazy when you think about it. But as far as win total for the Pittsburgh,
I think it's 8.5.
How much is it?
I thought it was 8.5. Yeah, on my show last week, me and my son looked at the win totals for all the teams. I'm pretty sure I think theirs was right around 8.5 for the Steelers. And it's funny, he kept saying to me, "Oh, you want to hang your hat on the Steelers?" Because I was like, "Oh, I think the Steelers can win this division this year." And I'm like, when you watch that quarterback playing that offensive line, it's like, no way, man. No, I may have to back off on that, before we do our season-long predictions like we always do. I'm like, maybe they can't win that division because the Ravens are still extremely tough. They're getting Derrick Henry coming in there. We know about their defense has reloaded, and then you have Joe Burrow coming back for the Bengals. I'd have to put them right now ahead of the Steelers because that offense, their defense can only carry them so much with Minka Fitzpatrick and the rest of those guys. So, yeah, I definitely think they're in trouble, And Tomlin got an extension. I remember end of last year you said, Lloyd, they're going to bring him back. What's going on with him? He got that extension. We always talk about this Steelers way. They don't get rid. But if this team struggles, they're going to have to start looking internally and say, all right, maybe after 18 years or so for Mike Tomlin, they may have to look in another direction.
11 playoffs, 7 division titles, 1 Super Bowl win. Started back in 2007. Yeah, I just cannot justify hammering the over for wins, 8.5. And the other thing is, is this a year where you have I'm playing Wilson, then I'm benching Wilson, then I'm going you have a year like that, you're not going to win many games. And I don't see them beating Cincinnati and or the Baltimore Ravens. Like, they might have a win or two. They might have a win or two in that division, but it might come at and Cleveland's actually even going to be better if you think about it, even more. I mean, I pulled up their schedule, And this is, the more I think about it, this is probably why Wilson's going to start, because they have 3 of their first 4 games on the road. That's a big thing when we're talking about, even from the gambling aspect and sticking that kid out there. So they go to Atlanta, they go to Denver, they have their home opener against the Chargers, and then they're on the road against the Colts, and then home against Dallas, and then back on the road against the Raiders. So, yeah, I mean, are you going to trust Fields to open up the season 3 out of the first 4 or 5 weeks on the road, or are you going to trust a veteran quarterback? But I also believe that Russell Wilson has 0 wiggle room. If Russell Wilson has back-to-back weeks where he's 10 of 23 for $178 and a pick, and he repeats that performance and they're 0-2 or 1-3, I don't care how much he's making, they're going to go to Fields, because Mike Tomlin's not going to risk his job. He's just not.
Right. And Q, they can win games ugly. So they want a quarterback that's not going to turn the football over, who's going to keep the team on the field and punt when needed, and then kind of lean on that defense to get some timely turnovers. Wilson did throw for 26 touchdowns last year for the Broncos. So
there you go. It should be under center for the Giants.
So we'll see what he's going to do. But yeah, that is a tough gambit. They're winnable games, and you want that veteran presence. I can't wait for that week 2 game. He's back at Denver. Can he get it done against Bo Nix? And Justin Fields is notoriously a slow starter, and he's had some turnover issues. And Tomlin wants somebody that's going to take care of the football. And now at this stage in his career, Wilson's become check down Charlie. So he's at least protecting the football. But you want to see after those first 7 games or so, because they play the Jets on Sunday Night Football in week 7. You'll really get a good barometer of this team, whether they're going to stick with Wilson or go with the kid. But the Steelers are on prime time a lot, and we're going to watch this soap opera play out.
Yeah, you mentioned, and I'm glad you did, you mentioned Bo Nix. I mean, you got some talking heads now saying that Bo Nix is the best quarterback to come out of the draft. Now, again, we get very high. That offense of Green Bay, there was no love. They struggled big time. They only scored, I think it was a safety in that game, 27-2. Nix, I watched a little bit of that game when they re-aired it. 8 of 9, 80 yards, touchdown. Engineered a couple nice little drives, some nice throws, poised in the pocket, looks the part, big, strong arm. I would say pump the brakes a little bit. But, again, the expectation is that he's going to be the starter. It's not going to be Jarrett Stidham, and it's not going to be Zach Wilson. You look at this Denver squad right now. They open up against Seattle, the Steelers, and the Bucs. So where are you at right now with Bo Nix? Is this kind of a wait and see, or do you like what you've seen from the kid thus far?
I like what I've seen, and I watched a lot of that game too. And Sean Payton wants somebody that's going to work in the confines of his offense. And Bo Nix coming there, he's a kid that works within the system and has a lot of ability. So why not give him an opportunity? And he's lit it up, quite frankly, this preseason. And we know with Jarrett Stidham. Jarrett Stidham has looked good in preseason, but in a regular season, he can't be a week in and out starter. So I think they're going to go with Bo Nix. Now, when I look at the offensive weapons on his team, Cortland Sutton's okay. They have Mims. They have Josh Reynolds coming over there. The running backs are okay. So, but there's not a lot of help for the quarterback here, but why not give the kid the opportunity? And at Seattle is a winnable game to start with. And then Pittsburgh, as long as they can block them, they're going to have a chance there. And then we talked about Tampa Bay in week 3. Tampa Bay, that's going to be an interesting one on the road. I think they could possibly compete in that one too. So I think it's going to be Bo Nix, and John Payton's going to see where he goes from there, because obviously he was done with Russell Wilson. He was like, give me anybody else.
Yeah, as we kind of come full circle, that was not the head coach quarterback relationship that you can kind of, put in the folklore of NFL history, right? Sean Payton, Russell Wilson. You knew Russell Wilson was done when when a reporter commented about a parking space. And Sean Payton was like, no one has a reserved spot here. We knew it was pretty much the end right there for Russell Wilson. All right, my friend, before I let you get out of here, where can everyone hear you besides on the drive with Q, and obviously when we do BYP, Back Your Play?
Yeah, we got Lloyd Vance's Insider Football tonight on Coastal Sports Network from 8 to 9:15. Angel will be behind the glass, and we're going to talk about a lot of things. Just getting ready for the season. I think we may have a preview of the NFC East, talking about Jaden Daniels, you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I think Washington's going to be a fun team to watch. I mean, they've been bad for so long. You look at the way they ended the season, 7-8 straight losses. I mean, Rivera and Eric Bieniemy were gone, right? But sometimes you clean house. The teams that quietly kind of go about their business, they tend to kind of surprise the rest of the league. So, but all right, my friend, always appreciate you. We'll catch you with me later on the week. BYP, we'll start to look at some of these futures and some of these divisional winners as well. Got some good odds and some futures and an opportunity to put a little coin in the pocket. But appreciate you jumping on board for a couple of moments, pal.
All right, Q. Thanks for having me on.
All right, there you have it. Our good friend, Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on Sports Radio 102.9 FM, The Game, Coastal Sports Network. Got a lot of Facebook messages rolling through, and I want to get to them on the other side as we are about 20 past the 4 o'clock hour on the East Coast. We'll take you up to 5 o'clock straight up. Don't forget, start the day and the week off right. Pete Shepard Show Monday to Friday, 7 to 10 in the morning. Martinez and Company from 10 to 12, and myself to drive 3 to 5 with Q. You got some new shows up and about on SR 102.9 FM, The Game. Don't forget to download the app and also put in the website for favorites, SR1029thegame.com. All right, we'll take a quickie timeout. We will come back on the other side. Got a lot of Giant fans chiming in. Got some Steelers fans chiming in. Even a rare Broncos fan that's feeling a little giddy on the other side. We'll get their comments as well. You guys can chime in 727-858-6650, 20 past 4 o'clock hour. We'll take you up to 5 on this Monday edition of The Drive with Q.
To some people, the sound of a baby babbling doesn't mean much. But that's not necessarily true. By 6 months, they're combining vowels and consonants. By 9 months, they're trying out different kinds of sounds. And by 12 months, their babbling is beginning to take on some meaning. Especially if there's no babbling at all. Little to no babbling by 12 months or later is just one of the possible signs of autism in children. Early screening and intervention can make a lifetime of difference and unlock a world of possibilities. Take the first step at autismspeaks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
The following is made possible by Dad.
Why was the basketball court all wet? Because the players kept dribbling all over it.
The dad joke. Corny, grown-worthy, but also one of the simplest ways to share a moment with your kids.
Why do you have to be careful when it's raining cats and dogs? Because you might step in a poodle.
And kids that spend more time with their dads grow up to be smarter, more successful.
Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding.
And, with any luck, funnier adults.
Why didn't the skeleton go to the dance? Because he didn't have any body to go with.
Dad jokes rule. So take a moment to make a moment and give your kid a laugh. It's as easy as going to fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
That's really funny.
All right. Well, hopefully Q will come right back. Apparently, he either if.
All right, 4:22 on a Monday. We'll take up to 5. Let me get to some of these. Yes. Hello, Angel. Hello.
Magic presto. Like you were there, and I'm like, he's live, and then poof, and be gone.
I think the audience knows by now there might be a 10-second lull when we have to refresh, and they're okay. This is, we have to fight through these things. We're not going to lose them 10 seconds. We won't. They'll stick with us. But yes, presto, I am live. How are you?
I am good, although I'm hearing a lot of your great takes that you came out with today, firing up on a Monday afternoon. But it does seem, I know you're about to get back into your topics here, but why are Giants fans so upset?
Because I think they see the Giant fan is a delusional fan. They're delusional. And I think I've earned the right to speak for many a Giant fans. They want to look at things through their blue glasses. And the reality is they think, poof, Daniel Jones is going to turn it on all of a sudden this year. And that's not going to be the case. And I've got 20-something odd comments already from the Giants take, right? And it's like a mixed bag. And my thing is they got sold a bill of goods, and it happens in the NFL. Sometimes a quarterback just plays above and beyond and he gets paid and he never lives up to that contract, or they're constantly injury prone. And look, Carson Wentz, when he burst on the scene, the kid made every friggin' throw possible. He was an MVP candidate until he got hurt on the road against the Rams. Never the same quarterback, just never the same. But the Giants won a playoff game. And I think what happened was it was a smoke and mirrors. It's hard to win in the NFL. It is. But it was almost one of those, yeah, you won a game, but you really weren't a great team. You weren't really as good as maybe those around you were making you out to be. Listen, they won some ugly games. They weren't blowing teams out. It reminded me of 2016 with McAdoo when they won 11-5 and they went on the road and they should have beat Green Bay and they didn't. And Eli actually threw for just under 300 and you had all the drops. That was the boat game, the boat trip. You had all the drops from Shepard and Odell, and it was a debacle. But that year, their defense won them so many games, ugly games. A couple years ago, Daniel Jones won them games with his legs, Saquon with his legs. They weren't doing anything out of the ordinary, though. They just weren't. They were a product of a soft schedule, and when they really need to step up and beat big-time teams, i.e. Dallas and the Eagles, they still couldn't do it. But they won a playoff game, and they were banking on the quarterback to lead them, and that's exactly what he did. The problem is when you do that, look, when you throw for 300 yards in a playoff game and add 78 on the ground, that's a hell of a game as a quarterback. But as I mentioned, they stepped up against Seattle. They lost. Detroit, they lost. Dallas, they lost. The Eagles, they got waxed, right? They played them hard late. They still lost. They lost on a field goal against Minnesota. So the great teams figure out ways to win those games. But they eventually went and they played Minnesota a couple weeks later, beat them in the wild card game, and then they didn't show up against the Eagles. Daboll panicked, went for fourth down early in that game, and that was pretty much the game. That was pretty much the game. I mean, if you go back and you remember that wild card game, 38-7, it was 14-0. You blink. I mean, it was 28-0 at the half. They were not ready for the bright lights, but yet they believe they saw enough in their quarterback to give him 160-something odd million, X amount up front, X amount guaranteed. Here you go. And what happens? He follows up with what? He turns around and he follows that best season of his career, and he only plays in 6 games. And he didn't play well in those 6 games. He didn't. He had one moment when they came back and they were down big against Arizona and beat the Cardinals. That's it. So sometimes you're a product of your own success, and in this time it was a negative, but we've seen it before in the NFL. Quarterbacks have nice seasons, and I also think the Giants want so bad to believe that he's a franchise quarterback. They want to believe that Daniel Jones is the answer so bad that they're going to spin it and push it and promote it and brand it and market it where he's the guy. Go back and look at the game the other night. I mean, guys are hitting me up left and right. Mike just said, Q, 100% correct on Daniel Jones. You can talk about the interceptions. How about the fact that he still doesn't know how to friggin' slide and avoid an injury? Just exactly how his neck got hurt in 2021. Yeah. Like, that's just decision-making. like understanding, living the fight for another down. These things are not changing. Will chimes in. Q, you've nailed it. If you go back and you look at Daniel Jones, he's committed a whopping 64 turnovers in 60 games. He's lost 24 fumbles. Go and do the research, Q. He's thrown 40 picks, and he's been sacked 180 times. Are you kidding me? The GM is an absolute dumbass for giving him $160 million. Listen, what am I going to? I can't argue with that. I can't. Daniel Jones reminds me of Dave Brown when the Giants got him in the supplementary draft from Duke. Daniel Jones is a nice kid. He's an athletic quarterback, and he has a pretty arm, and he's a strong arm quarterback, and the kid's tough. But I don't believe he's a quarterback that can lead the Giants. I just don't. I don't look at this kid and say he is the definition of a franchise quarterback. I feel as though I wanted to believe that he is, right? Because what happens is, what do? We defend these guys. We try to come up with a narrative. We want to spin a narrative that makes sense in our eyes, that the quarterback can play a little bit, right? But he will have a couple moments this year that will dazzle. And then he will have a couple, are you friggin' kidding me moments? Or he'll throw the back-breaking pick. I want to be wrong. I really do. I want to be wrong because it's frustrating to watch a quarterback. This makes no sense. Nobody's talking about this. I can't wrap my head around it. This kid threw 24 touchdowns his rookie season. 24 touchdowns. He has not thrown for more than 15 since. I cannot wrap my head around that. How's that even possible? Now, granted, he's missed some time, but for the life of me, and I don't want to hear any more about the offensive line. I don't care. I know the offensive line sucks. The Giants haven't had an offensive line in 15 friggin' years. I don't want to hear it anymore. Then stop drafting quarterbacks. Fix the offensive line first, then go and draft a quarterback. They're going to be bad like the Patriots, maybe like the Steelers. Are they going to suck for Shador? I don't know. Is Sanders going to be wearing a Giant uniform next year? How horrible is that? I'm talking about the friggin' Giant season being done, and it's August 19th. What the hell kind of fan am I? Like, think about that. August 19th, can I get to Halloween where there's some relevant NFL football left? No, but all jokes aside, I think we were just trying to force a square peg in a round hole with Daniel Jones. And listen, the kid banked a lot of money, right? And if he does not play 17 games this year of competitive football, right, where the Giants aren't getting blown out, where he can elevate the level of his teammates, that's the first thing you got to look at. But if he can't put up 3,800 to 4,000 yards and 25-plus touchdowns, get rid of him. I'm done. Get rid of him. Because I gave you a list of quarterbacks that can do this in the NFL. Friggin' C.J. Stroud, a rookie. Jordan Love, they were getting ready to run him out of town. Look at the numbers they put up. I mean, I can give you a quarterback you would be like, wait, really? Like, it's just Russell friggin' Wilson who's cooked through 26 touchdown passes. I mean, come on, man. It's just, I'm done. Geno Smith threw for 3,600 yards and 21 touchdown passes. This guy can't throw for 3,800, 4,000 yards, 25-plus touchdown passes. We're going to use the same excuse every year that it's a friggin' offensive line? Stop. It's just insanity. You guys are doing the same crap over and over and over. The same friggin' behavior the Giant fan is doing over and over. The brass is doing the same shit over and over. They're expecting a different result. That's a definition of insanity. Nothing short of 17 games, competitive football, win some friggin' games, 38 to 4,000 yards, 25-plus touchdowns, and you just stay in these games. And you show signs that this offense can put up some points, not 17 a game. Where in the NFL, it's catered towards the offenses. Anything less than that, tear it down again. I don't care. I don't care. Then you become teams like the Jets were. Then you become how Tampa Bay was years ago. Then you become how Washington was or is. Then you become how Cleveland's been for 25 years until they started to figure it out. That's a poorly, piss poor run franchise because they haven't won shit since they won that second Super Bowl with Eli in 2011. They haven't won dick. They've been a laughing stock. Go and look to see how bad this friggin' team has been. Seriously, they sold a bill of goods because Eli looked good, and they wanted to just do him right and keep him around for another year or two. They were 9-7 in 2012. They were 7-9 in 2013, 6-10 in 2014, 6-10 in 2015. The aberration with McAdoo and his friggin' Denny-sized menu in 2016, they won 11 games. Then they went 3-13, 5-11, 4-12, 6-10, 4-13, 9-7-1, and then 6-11, and then finally, boom. I mean, so look, come on, man, stop. I mean, I feel as though some Giant fans they need an intervention. They need an intervention because what they see is not what the rest of us see. It's what they want to see, and that's not reality. And the reality is that they still have issues with the line. The quarterback's decision-making is piss poor. He's coming off a major injury. He's going to be rusty. He's not going to give you the numbers that you need. Their defense doesn't really have that dominant pass rusher. The secondary is suspect, and they can't beat the friggin' Philadelphia Eagles or the Dallas Cowboys to save their life. I'm done.
All right. Well, now that you put it in that perspective, because I wasn't even thinking about it that deep until you just pointed out. But so then if I guess it's easier said than done, but if the front office knows that it's that getting to be deplorable, then what do you do? I mean, obviously you need a major change at the helm.
They wanted to draft a quarterback. They wanted Jaden Daniels. They couldn't get him. I don't like when franchises, you can't win when you keep firing coordinators and head coaches. You can't win when you fire GMs every other year. You can't. It's like corporate America. You know, you got your lead, your supervisor, your boss, and then the guy above him or the owner of the company. You want sustainability, you want stability, you want consistency. And if you're replacing these guys like a revolving door every 2, 3, 4, 5 years, how do you expect the business to prosper? How do you expect the business to grow? Now, I understand there's circumstances where you have to get rid of these guys. I understand there's circumstances where some CEOs, some managers, some bosses, they're just too toxic. It's a bad environment. We've seen it in the NFL. We've seen it in corporate America. We've seen it all over. You flush them out. You start from scratch. But in sports, in the NFL, look at the teams that are successful. Like, seriously, look at the teams that have a 10, 15 plus year run. And I would define success like this. They're playing winning football. They're winning divisions, maybe not every year. They're getting to the playoffs. Maybe they win a couple playoff games. Hell, maybe they're making a deep run. And if they're fortunate enough to win a Super Bowl, I define that as success. And if you can do that, you blend and mix and match a couple divisions, couple playoff wins, couple losses, couple Super Bowl wins, or a win here and there, get to the Super Bowl over 10 years. That is stability. That's consistency that fans want. That's what players are looking for, right? When all of a sudden I'm a free agent, where do I want to go? I want to go to a winning franchise. So teams like the Steelers, they were able to do that with Cowher and then Tomlin. The Eagles under Andy Reid were able to do that, right? Kansas City right now under Andy Reid with Mahomes. Baltimore with Lamar Jackson. Green Bay for all those years with Aaron Rodgers. All these teams were able to just consistently put out a good, decent product where you knew year in and year out they were going to compete. They were going to be right there week 15, 16. Right there to win the division. Right there to make the playoffs. Maybe make a little bit of a run. Maybe have an opportunity. San Francisco right now. Maybe have an opportunity to get to the Super Bowl. But the Giants, when they get in, they either get bounced or they make a hell of a run. 86, you can argue they were the best team in the NFL. 90 was a great year. And they went on the road, 15-13, they beat the 49ers. And they're, Pat Summerall, the great line, there will be no three-peat. Other than that, they had a couple runs. They got to the Super Bowl in 99-2000. They got waxed by the Ravens. They had the debacle against San Francisco, 2002-2003. Then all of a sudden, Coughlin, Eli, you get get bounced by Carolina. Well, Carolina first, then the Eagles. Then you get back there, and then boom, you make a run. Then Plaxico shoots himself. Should have went back to the Super Bowl. Then you have a down year. You're 10-6, the Deshaun Jackson game. Then the following year, 2011, you win a Super Bowl. It's like feast or famine. But yet they had a level of success. 10 plus years, they haven't been successful. Jets, same thing. I can go on and on with all these teams. So when you constantly fire your head coach or you're changing your GM, I mean, they're going to want to bring in their guys. Now I have to implement Angels offense. I have to implement Angels defense. Angels going to bring in his offensive coordinator. He wants to bring in his defensive coordinator. He's got a way he's going to manage his team. He's got a way he's going to draft and build. Is it going to be free agency? Is it going to be trades? Is it going to be via the draft? I keep bringing in different guys left and right. It's a laughing stock. I mean, name me one franchise that constantly fires a head coach and a GM and successful in any sport. Because they don't exist. And that's where I get frustrated. I mean, hell, I'm at the point with, say, the Yankees right now. Get rid of Cashman and Boone. You get to the point after a while where it's like, what have you done? What have you won? And maybe part of it is, as a New York sports fan, to some extent, I've been spoiled. But the Yankees haven't won diddly since 2009. I'll probably never see a Knicks championship in my lifetime. The Rangers have had success, and the Giants have been hit or miss. When they make their run, they make their run. But again, I ask the listeners out there, like, give me a team when you're firing these head coaches and you're bringing in different coordinators and GMs that are going to be successful year in and year out. They're not. They're not, man. The Eagles had, you guys had, I think Eagles fans, when you look back at Andy Reid's career, and Andy Reid's a Hall of Fame head coach, you almost have to underappreciate Andy Reid because of what he's been able to do now with Kansas City. But every single season, it was just nauseating that you knew the Eagles were going to kick the shit out of the Giants and the Eagles were going to win the NFC East. And that was McNabb, and that was Andy Reid. That was a level of success. And that was Jeffrey Lurie. And that was a great defense, and Jim Johnson. But that ran its course. But as an Eagles fan, would you take, let's go, I would say 1999 to, 2009, right? That's when they lost to Arizona. Correct me if I'm wrong. NFC Championship, I think. So that's a decade. That is a decade. Now, you're going to take that decade, even though they went to 4 straight NFC championships, and you look at the failures, right? They were not ready for the Rams on the road. That was a young team. Then all of a sudden you turn around, the Carolina game, Ricky Manning Jr., he picks off McNabb 3 times, had injuries. To this day, I remember Runyon still screaming, run the friggin' football in the second half. They didn't. Then Tampa Bay to close down the vet. Then they finally get over the hump. But they had a 10-year run, a 10-year stretch where they were a consistently good franchise. Baltimore, consistently good franchise. San Francisco, a consistently good franchise. Pittsburgh for all those years. They all had something in common. They didn't shuffle around the friggin' GM. They didn't get rid of head coaches. They didn't get rid of coordinators. I mean, once in a while you'll see changes, but for the most part, they kept the core intact. And that's why these teams are successful. I'm looking at a franchise that went through Shermer, McAdoo, Judge, and maybe now they're going to go through another head coach. The Jets have done the same friggin' thing for years. Tampa Bay, where you are, they learned the hard way. They learned the hard way. They went through coaches. They recycled. They couldn't find the quarterback. Cincinnati, same thing. Couldn't find the quarterback. Miami finally feels they have a franchise quarterback, and people are getting on the kid because he got paid. But you ask any Miami Dolphins fan, they're yearning for the days of Dan Marino. And you know what else Dan Marino used to do that we love? Besides the Isotona commercials. You know what Dan Marino would do every time he threw a pick? He would always blame the wide receiver for running the wrong route. Got to go. But like that. But they're yearning. They're yearning. These teams are yearning for that continuity, that consistency. You only have a handful of teams in the NFL that are really good football teams. The rest, it's middle of the road, man. It's middle of the pack. And then you've got the bottom feeders. And the Pats. I think, again, Carolina. I think the Giants. I think the Steelers now. You've got some bottom feeders. Yeah, that's what he used to do. Just run it down.
The other two other things with Kansas City here for a second, and I know I've been busy doing other stuff. When did Carson Wentz become the walk-on backup?
I mean, come on, are you kidding me? Carson Wentz hasn't been relevant since what?
Right.
Listen, if you can hold a clipboard in the NFL and you had a moderate level of success. By the way, his career, I remember, Carson Wentz, again, you go back to that season, 2017, I think he finished third MVP before the injury and everything. Me and my buddies were like, this kid doesn't miss. He's a journeyman quarterback right now. A couple more seasons with Philly, then Indy, then Washington, then the Rams. Now what? What's he with? He's with Kansas City, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, you got a viable option just in case. You got to, he's Carson Wentz is Ginger Jesus. Tebow is sexy Jesus. Carson Wentz is Ginger Jesus.
Well, good points that way. But then the other thing too is like I understand it. Pat Mahomes, tons of people have fever on him. It was 2 days that I understand it was behind the back pass. But
Marino used to do that and warm us like it was nothing. Yeah, I know where you're going with this. Yep.
It's like, I get it. All right.
It's Mahomes, man. It's what they do.
I guess. It was just
Mahomes.
It was ridiculous. Like, I swear, if ESPN could have done like, all right, here's the whatever, hypothetical Jets Green Bay game. Oh, hold on. Patrick Mahomes just threw behind the back pass.
Yeah.
Knicks are getting ready to start the season. Oh, here's Patrick Mahomes behind the back pass. Like, holy craps, man.
How about ESPN? How about ESPN getting rid of Ponder and RG3?
Yepers. And yet they say because of cutbacks, whatever.
No, I don't believe. Well, I think Ponder, her political views and her other thoughts on certain topics. And by the way, it's funny too, because so RG3 pretty much without calling out Feinbaum called him out the other day. And then the irony is he gets fired and people are trying to connect the two. That's not it. That's not it at all. But I find it very interesting that, and let me, full disclosure, by the way, I do not watch ESPN at all. It's just unwatchable. The reason it's newsworthy is because you have notable guys in media or guys and girls in media. RG3 is probably, he can make more money if he did a show on YouTube or he got picked up by a fast channel. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
But Ponder's been there for a while. Remember, she butted heads with Barstool. And Barstool had their one episode, and that was just debunked after that, right? But I do find the timing of this extremely interesting. Let me get to a couple of comments. Jeff, listening in North Jersey, chimes in. Q, I can't believe you're already blasting the Giants. It's friggin' August, and already you're calling for Sanders to get drafted. I have this thing where if you can't give me meaningful football before the leaves start to come down and it's Halloween, then yeah, it's just because that's when they start with the pumpkin spice. So that keeps me going because once they end the pumpkin spice, and if the Giants are spitting the bit and they're friggin' 2-9, I'm going to be miserable. I will be I don't like pumpkin spice should be 24/7. It should be 365 days in a year, but I don't want to be one of those guys that's caught on tape like they run out of Popeyes and they go ballistic. I remember one time I went into D&D. I went into Dunkin' Donuts. Now, granted, I have my fresh roasted coffee, could sponsor the show, but I went into Dunkin' Donuts and pumpkin spice was gone. Like they literally said, I'm sorry, but we don't no longer serve that. And I said, well, when was that? And they said, yesterday. I'm not going to lie. I started to bubble a little bit. I started to bubble a little bit because I was like, well, can you make an exception to the rule? I know you have it in the back. And I know for a fact they have it in the back because I know the guy on the island that owns the Dunkin' Donuts. So he peeled back the curtain. He told me all about the pumpkin spice. But the fact that I missed a cutoff and they couldn't even appease me, a loyal customer, going with my DD card, my rewards card, that pissed me off a little bit. So yes, going back to the Giants, if they're 2-10 and the leaves are still coming down and there's no more pumpkin spice, it's going to be miserable. And I'm telling you right now, I foresee that scenario. I think they're going to be really, really bad. Now, I'm not going to say 2-15.
Right.
They might win 4, maybe 5 games. Washington's going to be better. You know where I feel with the Dallas Cowboys. I think it's going to be a long season for the Cowboys. And we don't know just yet with your Philadelphia Eagles because I still believe there is a major disconnect between the head coach and the quarterback, even though everyone's trying to debunk that. So isn't it funny, though? So Tua comes out and says what he says, and then you have Jalen Hurts with his current coach and Nick Sirianni, who had a bunch of opportunities to kind of calm the waters about the relationship with the head coach.
Yeah.
And he really didn't. It was almost like leaving it open-ended. They're going to be a fascinating team to watch too this year, the Philadelphia Eagles. But as I said, we got the week 1 right around the corner. I want to hit on a little baseball on the other side. Got about 10 to play with. Quickie timeout, 727-858-6650. Keep it locked in on a Monday edition of The Drive right here. Sports Radio 1029 FM, The Game. Oh, by the way, I did have to laugh because this is funny. Like you and I joke about this here and there. I can't even be like discreet about this. So I'm on X, tweeting out, seeing some of the feedback, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, all right, we got some neighbors, that typically will chime in and whatnot. And all right, here we go, same tweet, same content matter.
Yeah.
What did you say? Control C and then V?
Yeah, that's it. Pretty much just look at the keyboard. Oh, wait, that's what they're doing?
Yeah.
Control C.
Yeah.
On the screen over here, Control V, and ta-da.
We give you free content. That's what we do. All right, about 10 to play. We'll take you up to 5 o'clock straight up. Last time out.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Oh, we got the fast one in there. Bang, bang, bang. 727-858-6650. All right, let me give you a couple of baseball plays before we get out of here. Man, I did not think the Marlins were that bad. I think Marlins have the Diamondbacks tonight. Mets, O's. I like that pitching matchup for the Mets. Peterson on the hill, 701, 3.34. That is minus 130. You might get 135 back for the Mets. Baltimore actually plus 115. Their pitcher's been raked against the coals of late. Rodgers. This is a game that I would shade towards the over on the total, but I still like the Mets money line at 135. If you catch it at 130, more power to you. Second game, Red Sox and the Astros. Astros, man, talk about a veteran team. 9 out of 11? All of a sudden, boom, they just totally are separating themselves from Seattle. I would not want to play the Houston Astros. They're going to win the division, it appears. So, again, you don't have to worry about that from a wild card standpoint. But you got Boston still struggling this year. That's a tough pitching matchup. This is why the line's sitting where it's at right now. Houston minus 145. I'm not too confident laying that to win back 100, even though I like Boston plus 120. I'm going to go with the under. It looks like the total run line is at 9. I'll take the under on that one. And then the Chicago White Sox, who right now, the White Sox have lost 2 straight. They've lost 4 of 5. Obviously, they beat the Yanks 12-2, and then they dropped 2 of 3. They came back. I don't know how the hell they beat the Astros 5-4, but then they lost 2 straight. Their offense stinks. They're batting .222. I told you this the last time they had that ridiculous losing streak. If you're going to lean the White Sox right now, as I say that, watch. They beat the Giants tonight. But if you're going to lean them right now, early on in this losing streak, because I have a sneaky suspicion that the way they're going to close out the season, and I'll pull up their schedule right now, they've got 3 against San Fran, Detroit, Texas, and the Mets. Folks, they might have another slide where it's 10, 11 games. Lean them, try to catch them. Don't even worry about what you're laying on them. But I can see another 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 type of game losing streak for the Astros. They're so bad. They can't even get out of their own way. Major League Baseball, a decent average in the bigs is 243. Collectively as a team, they are batting 219. Think about that. They have 3 players that already struck out 100 times. They're going to have a total of 6 or 7 players strike out over 100 times. They cannot hit home runs. They're not a home run hitting team. They got 0 power. Their OPS stinks. Their slugging percentage stinks. They've got no heart of the lineup. And they're 30-95. They cannot wait for the season to end fast enough. They just fired their manager after he stops the slide, and they finally got a win after losing, 20-something odd in a row. But if you're going to lean a squad right now, make it the White Sox. I just think they're just a horrible, horrible franchise. They are a bad friggin' baseball team right now. I know the Phillies. I mentioned this last week with the Phillies, and I got a little pushback on this. I told you guys, if the Braves can figure out a way to get this to 4 or 5, they're going to start to put a little more pressure on Philadelphia. Now, the Braves got hit with an injury because Riley's going to miss about 6 to 8 weeks with a broken hand. But if you're the Phillies, you have to win the division. So if you're thinking about this right now, this is where you hang your hat on. Tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then fast forward to the 29th, the 30th, and the 31st, and then September 1st. 7 games the Phillies and the Braves play against each other. 7 games. That could decide the NL East. And if the Phillies spit the bit with the lead and the start that they had to open up the season, and they don't win the NL East, and they have to get one of these hot teams in the wild card, I mean, I cannot believe this. I didn't play it because I thought last year was a fluke and I already hit it, was Arizona. I mean, Arizona right now, even though they've dropped a couple in a row, they're still one of the hottest teams. Their playoff, their percentage is right around 87. They're going to get one of those wild cards the way it's shaping out. Right now, it's San Diego and Arizona, and then you got the Braves. The Mets are hanging around. But if I'm the Phillies, I don't want to see Atlanta. I don't want to see Arizona. And believe it or not, I don't want to see San Diego because they're starting to rake the baseball all over the place too. And that is a very tough division, an extremely tough division. The Dodgers are clearly the best team in the NL, but San Diego is plus 70 run differential. Arizona's plus 70 run differential. And the other 2 teams stink, San Francisco and Colorado. But if you're the Phillies, man, you got 7 against the Braves. Better figure it out now. you better figure it out. All right, got to start wrapping it up on a Monday edition of The Drive with Q. Rich Quinones here. Good stuff from Lloyd Vance. Appreciate him jumping on board. Rick with the late chime in. I want to see Atlanta. We have their number. Yeah, Atlanta's also been a team that's been banged up. We know that. But, man, these next 7 for the Braves against the Phillies. 2 series coming up should be very interesting. I would steer clear of Arizona if I was the if I was the Phillies. I gave you the plays. We'll tweet them out as well. We'll be back in the saddle later on the week. Don't forget, we'll have this up on demand, sr1029thegame.com. Download the app, share, tell your friends. We also came at you live on Broad Street South and my YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q, powered by our good friends over at Eye on TV, brought to you by Play It Again Sports, fresh roasted coffee, and egg to oak. So with that, don't forget later tonight, Lloyd Vance's Insider Football at 8 o'clock. I know he actually gave the little 8 to 9:15-ish. So you'll catch him later tonight, and you have all the shows as well running on the playlist. So if you missed any of them, whether it's Pete Shepard Show, Martinez and Company, The Drive with Q, Talking Hoops, Marshall Time, Let's Chat with Kat and Pat, go to SR1029 FM The Game, download the app, and you get all the shows on the playlist as well. So with that, appreciate Lloyd Vance, Angel Martinez behind the glass producer show, keeping us on the air. Give me a follow on Facebook, IG, and X as well, Rich Q on Q. Have a good Sports Wednesday. We will chat later on in the week. Until then, hasta luego, buen día.